Hey viewers, my name's Kara. I'm your host for Tuesdays here on the Pagan Perspective, and this week we're talking about deity again. I know, we talk about deity a lot. There's a lot to talk about concerning deity and the different ways that different pagans believe or don't believe in deity. This week we are answering a question that actually comes from our questioners' classmates in philosophy, who are always asking them, why are pagans not a part of the conversation? And what they mean is the God complex conversation about whether God is omnipotent, omniscient, omnipresent, and why are pagans not usually a part of that conversation? Their theory is that it's because pagans believe so differently about deity, and it's such a wide range of beliefs, that we all kind of know that our views are different, so there's no overall stance. And I agree with that. There is no overall stance of pagans in general of how we believe in deity. We absolutely know that. Even pagans who follow the same path, the same tradition, may have different ways that they see deity. And this, I have to say, this is funny to me because I was reading through some articles today on Twitter. If you are following me on Twitter, you can look forward to me retweeting a bunch of articles that I think are interesting that I find on different pagan websites that I follow that post individual articles, and political stuff and activism stuff and random stuff. That's it. I'm not on Twitter a lot, but when I am on there, it's usually to read articles and share and sometimes comment on some that I have read. So today I was reading a lot that happened to be about deity, different things about deity, different traditions, and in explaining those traditions, talking about how they interact with deity. And so I thought about this, I'm like, we talk about deity a lot, and something that I have started saying is just that I recognize and accept the fact that I am never going to be able to accurately explain to someone else how I believe in deity. There just isn't a good way. So I was reading an article by John Beckett on Patheos Pagan about polytheism and talking about how polytheism is theism. And I loved that article because that stance makes a lot of sense to me. Like, obviously. Polytheism is a form of theism. And I consider myself to be a polytheist, albeit a specific type of polytheist, which I know not all polytheists recognize. And we've talked about that in the past on the channel. We've talked about labels of that variety. My video on the subject talked about all the different labels that could be applied to my path and that other people might apply to my path that I don't personally identify with, but that by definition could apply. All kinds of things, right? It gets really crazy. And then I know there are the people who are just like non-label people, like, I don't want a label because labels just put you in boxes. And like, that's true, and I get that. And what I'm always saying also is that labels are helpful insofar as they are helpful, and when they start to be harmful, get rid of them, don't use them, don't feel that you have to limit yourself to that. But I do find them really helpful for me most of the time, so we come up with these labels that are kind of in between places. Not quite this thing, but not quite the other thing, right? That's where I live, is in the middle of a lot of things, right? In the gray area, on the threshold, at the edge. And I don't know how not to do that, right? So I was reading this article and I'm like, yeah, I agree with this. And I also recognize that there are people who don't think the way that I view deity should be labeled what we call it, you know? And then reading an article that I also retweeted on Twitter. My Twitter handle is cutewitch772, which is also my personal channel and my Etsy shop and my Instagram, all kinds of that. I'm cutewitch772 everywhere. Anyway, another article that I retweeted was about modern Hecatean witchcraft, because I thought, oh, okay, I've never read anything specifically about that, you know, this label, this title that is given to a specific path. And I was reading it, and the author of that article actually identifies as a monotheist witch because they are devoted to Hecate. And I thought, well, okay, that's something new and good to know. I mean, not totally a new concept, but good to know that there are witches who consider themselves monotheistic if they're focused on one deity. There is a video that I did forever and ever and ever ago. My partner's here. Hi. Forever and ever ago on Pagan Perspective. I recorded it from the computer lab of my dorm hall, I remember, because it was really dark and like cinder block walls and all kinds of ridiculousness. But talking about the many definitions of different types of theisms. And so I don't remember off the top of my head without looking it back up or watching that video again. But I remember there is a word for when you recognize the existence of many deities, but you only worship one. And I think that is a more accurate label for pagans who focus on one deity, but that's just me. I don't identify as that because I don't just focus on one deity, but I feel like that would be the word that I would think people would use rather than monotheism, which is usually defined as only believing in one deity. Now, I don't know, maybe that author really does only believe in Hecate and worships Hecate because Hecate is the only deity, right? I don't know. I don't know what they believe about that. I didn't read all of their stuff, and they didn't go into that in the article because it was about Hecate and witchcraft, right? So, anyway, just recognizing that there are people within this community who identify as polytheist. There are people in this community who identify as monotheist. There are people who identify somewhere in between, and as pantheists and panentheists, and omnitheists is another term. There are a ton of terms, right? We come up with terms to help us describe who we are and what we believe in. And no matter what term I end up using, it never seems like enough for some people. There's always people saying, no, you can't use that term because it means this, or no, that doesn't sound right. I accept that. I don't care. Like, nobody else can tell me what I believe. It is a little bit frustrating when people want to know something and you try to explain it, but there's just no way to communicate it with words. But at the end of the day, I know that I also don't have to explain it to anybody else. I just have to do what I do and be who I am and worship who I worship and work with who I work with, all of these different things that we say for different reasons, right? So, in short, yes, I agree that we're probably not part of that God conversation because we understand that our views are so different. But at the same time, I would argue that we are having that conversation, but we typically have that conversation amongst ourselves. It seems like it's typically pagans talking to other pagans about whether we believe this, that, or the other thing. But yes, we are coming at it from a point of view that we understand that throughout paganism, everyone believes differently. And it's not typically you can't believe that or you shouldn't believe that because that's wrong. It's usually just I don't know if you're using the right word for what you believe, but we all understand that everybody believes different things, different ways that we do. But just in reading those articles, there are attempts for people to be like, no, polytheism is this. This is what it means. So we are having this conversation. We are part of this conversation. Are the gods real? Are they literal? All these things, right? No words. There's so many words and no appropriate words at this time, right? But yeah, so I agree with the questioner's stance, but I also think we are having this conversation. I mean, look at how many times over the 9, 10, how many years have we been doing this collab now? 9 years we've been doing this collab. How many times have people asked us about deity and how we believe in deity and different ways that we believe in the gods and what gods and how do we worship them and all of these things, right? We're having this conversation. I just don't know if it's the same way that you have these debates and discussions in philosophy class. I took an ancient philosophy course and we talked about the nature of God, and I'm pagan and I was pagan at the time. I was a part of that conversation. I never particularly felt like they weren't talking to me. It just depends, right? It just totally depends. There are so many different and beautiful ways to believe or not believe in something. Okay? I'm done rambling at you. I will see you guys next calendar year, maybe, or next week. I forget how I came up with the schedule for this month, you guys, and I still don't remember if we're posting regular hosts next week or if it's subs next week and then we go right into our break. But we take a break over the winter holidays, so there will be no videos posted for the last few weeks in December, and we will start again in January. So we do that every year. It's our annual winter holiday break. And it's not winter in the southern hemisphere, but it's the end of the Gregorian calendar year. I almost said the Julian calendar. It's the end of the civic calendar year holiday break. Cool. Have a good one. I'll see you next time. Don't forget to be awesome, blessed be, and goodbye.